is always a question that gets requested more than any other on my channel, and I found a Reddit post in reference to the story. I've made videos on this before, and it's always difficult for me to answer in a 1-word or 2-sentence sufficient answer. So I'll just share with you this story. My fiance is practicing SR. So my fiance is training for a course and recently started practicing SR to have more energy to train. I'm just going to stop that immediately because I love the intention in which this individual's partner is using this tool. Look, guys, I think often, and I've made this point numerous times, is that I'm not ideological, right? I am only, what would you say, loyal to the system that gets you what you want, right? If that for you is SR, brilliant, wonderful. If it isn't, then fine. But you have to anecdotally go through that particular experience yourself before writing it off. Usually the individuals who are cynical are the individuals who are typically most addicted to their own carnal impulses, and they would have never experienced what they can experience when they begin to control themselves with a little bit more diligence in this matter. So use this as a tool, like you use fasting as a tool, like you use cold showers as a tool. I don't take cold showers every single day, but when I need an extra bit of vigor, when I'm in a kind of mode where I am maybe working on a big project, SR, fasting, use it with intention. I've had relationships in the past with women whereby there have been bouts where I move in between continence, SR, carezza, and then just traditional, let's call it traditional Western intercourse with the fireworks at the end, okay? And I'll share a little bit more and add a little bit more nuance on that later, but let's keep with the story here. So there've been multiple occasions that we've had intercourse and broken his streak. Immediately after, he is mad that he has released and takes the pleasure out of it for me because of the frustration of breaking his streak, I guess. Now, this is the distinction, right? This is the difference between somebody who is perhaps more ideologically possessed, an individual. Look, this is obviously a horrible experience for this particular woman, and she's obviously going to be cynical of individuals who are going to practice this in the future. But the key here is good communication, right? And hey, if you mess up, because this is a very difficult skill, by the way, to manage carezza, which is from the French vernacular meaning to caress, which is basically a slower, more intimate form of intercourse, right? Which isn't for the purposes of procreation, it's for the purposes of oxytocin, so more pair bonding, right? And when you actually move in this direction, because I'll share the next kind of part to this story here and then add this on, because this is where the value really comes in. She's saying here that it takes the pleasure out of it for me because of the frustration of breaking his streak. Okay, he does not try to pleasure me or try to be loving in any other way. I feel neglected in our relationship. He doesn't understand that I feel a disconnect. I feel upset about this, and we both feel that we don't understand each other. Before this, he was highly sexual with even more of a sex drive than me, right? So a means to an end. Obviously, this individual isn't getting the outcomes that he wants in terms of keeping a good-natured relationship going to the future. But I want to pick up on the point in which he was talking about a disconnect. Now, I would imagine that this individual is not well-versed in anything to the affiliation of carezza, or you could talk about white tantra, for example, or tantra in general, because the purposes of carezza is to build connection. It is not to use your partner as a means solely for the primary purpose as a dopaminergic response, right? It's actually to build oxytocin, which is that pair bonding hormone, pair bonding chemical, right? So I don't know the details and the nuances in this particular story, but when I've practiced carezza with my previous partners, immediately the first thing that they say is, I feel closer. I feel like we have we've got a better connection in that way, and it's more sensual. It's not as aggressive, because the thing is, and I don't like to admit this, and you probably don't like to admit this either, but the only way that we learn how to have sex is through watching adult material, and adult material is not sex, right? That's aggressively using your partner for a means to get off, which is fine, by the way. If that's what you want to choose and that makes you happy, that's fine. But I really think that there is a great utility in understanding that there are different variances in how you express that particular sexual energy. Some of the aforementioned ones I've mentioned already. So, of course, again, I would like more detail in this case, and this sounds kind of creepy from me asking about the details and how he's actually going about engaging in something like carezza. Yeah, really weird. But the idea here is that it's supposed to build connection. It's supposed to build connection. That dissociation that a lot of women will probably experience, and equally men will experience as well, is typically catalyzed by a series of promiscuous relationships and one-night stands. Because again, one-night stands and promiscuity is not predicated on any pair bonding. It's predicated on you look attractive, I'm attractive, let's use one another as a means to get each other off. That's fundamentally what you're doing. I mean, let's not cover it up in these very colloquial ideas of, oh, I'm just having fun at the moment. You're using somebody else as a dildo and you're using somebody else as a fleshlight. That's what you're doing. That's fine. That's okay. There's no judgment from me here. That's your particular karma at this time that you need to hash out. It's going to come with its individual set of consequences, and but again, you have to live your life the way that you choose to in order to get to that place where you realize that, hey, that personal experience, the outcomes that I want, weren't working for me. I don't feel connected to people anymore because I'm seeing them from a perspective of solely flesh and not the soul, not the pneuma, not the breath. Yeah, and in this way, we bring more spirituality, we bring more connection, we bring more compassion, we bring more oxytocin into the relationship. Obviously, that isn't this individual's primary mannerisms here, and it's failed, or it looks like it's failing. Looks like it's failing for this particular individual. So I think this individual needs to cut what he's doing and probably go back if he wants to save his relationship. Or maybe this individual isn't as spiritually evolved as the counterpart. Now, I wanted to share with you a chapter in a book, because bringing up this conversation was always very, very difficult for me whenever I have new partners. And I've only had this conversation twice before. I would highly recommend you buy the book called Multi-Orgasmic Man. I'm going to put it up on the screen now. And it's by Mantak Chia. And there's actually a chapter in this book that is written for the partner, the wife, the girlfriend of the man who is wishing to bring a little bit more consciousness to how he's using sexual energy. So again, you can see here it says, this chapter is written for those of you as the female partner of a man who is practicing sexual kung fu. That's another vernacular that is used to describe what we are doing here. And it can give you an explanation of the motivation behind it. So the first one is understanding that men can have multiple orgasms without the fireworks at the end. So in the 1980s, sexologists William Hartman and Marilyn Fythen found about 12% of men that they studied were multi-orgasmic. I'll just read this one particular excerpt from a partner. One partner of a multi-orgasmic man recalls, the first time my boyfriend had an orgasm without the fireworks, I couldn't believe it. He was clearly experiencing as much pleasure as usual, and I could feel his, but much to my surprise, there was no release, and the moments later we are able to continue making love. It's amazing to me that he can have such intense orgasms without the release. Now I am surprised when he does release. I had to do a lot of, what would you say, verbiage gymnastics there to keep this as PG and scientific and to the point as possible without sullying your mind and equally my mind. I believe there's more excerpts from women who are talking about building a stronger connection, more intimacy, growing closer. And just anecdotally, what this does to your psychology, because again, we're raised in this world now. This is a very difficult conversation to have, especially on the internet, especially through this video. So I hope you guys are valuing it, because I'm being very transparent here. But the difficulty is we're raised on adult material culture. Like, that is the culture. You look I know you've heard it all before. You don't need me to reiterate this, but most people view the act of making love through the perspective of what they are watching, right? On the screens. That's the reference point in which they compare that to. And that is only for a means of entertainment and pleasure. It's not for a means of what the actual vernacular of the word is, what the etymology of the word is, which is making love. And I know that sounds Disney, but if you are a man who is interested in monogamy, if you want a wife, if you want to be married for a long time, and you have this kind of icky reflex about this concept of love, you will never get it. You will never get it. So we have to grow up and be a little bit more mature in this respect, and understand that we can't just lead from this perspective of purely fucking-ing, right? We have to consider the other. We have to consider the other if we want to keep the other, right? So that's the perspective in which it is coming from, and that is what I would lead with. So there's a couple of points here. The first is understanding that men can train themselves to be multi-orgasmic. There's actually a point here where it talks about that 3,000 years ago, the tradition of accumulating wisdom recorded how people can make love most pleasurably and healthily, which is predicated on the ideas that I'm sharing with you here. And also, there is also a point here, I can't believe I've missed it, or maybe it might be coming up. And the idea is basically, there is a distinction between sexual release and orgasm. There are two different processes. Ejaculation is one process, and orgasm is a different process. They are not exclusively together. They're two separate things. And with a bit of training, with a bit of intention, because again, you're not concentrating on, what your body feels like. You're concentrating on the big fireworks at the end, or the adult material you're watching. People are very disassociated with how they can separate that process. There's a very good app you can download for free called Mindgasm, which teaches you how to do this with a little bit more intention, because you have to unwire and then rewire yourself for healthier processes. Now, there's one other bit here. So here's, beyond the Big Bang, the separation between these two processes. And this is another excerpt. My husband used to feel very tired after releasing, and sometimes he would want to drink alcohol, and he would, where's it gone? And he would he would tend to get impatient or annoyed. Now he's so energetic and loving. So the male sexuality in the West remains incorrectly focused on the inevitable disappointment of simply getting that uptake in dopamine without the orgasmic process of, fundamentally love making. So I just want to kind of wrap this up in a more concise way for you guys to understand how you should communicate this to your partners, and how I did. First and foremost, there's a difference between those two processes, that you can experience just as much pleasure as she can, even more in my experience, without the fireworks at the end. And similarly, you can look at this from the perspective of women as well, because women will tell you all the time, especially if you're good friends with women, that every time they have sex, they don't have an orgasm, right? Obviously, it's very debilitating for the man, whoever's their partner, but it doesn't mean that they can't enjoy parts of that particular activity. And in the same way, men can, but we can also experience what is called an NEO, a non-ejaculatory orgasm in that regard. So it's education in that part. It's also education on the fact that there can be some, there's some evidence to say that there's a lot of evidence to say that frequent exhaustion in this respect is diminishing to the endocrinology, the androgen response of testosterone, vigor, zeal, energy, increased fatigue, all of these things. And you can lead with that. Look, I'm working on a big project at the moment. I'm going to be a little bit more conservative with whether or not we have traditional Western sex or if we have Eastern lovemaking, right? And if your partner is intelligent, if she's receptive to the ideas, if she reads, then she's going to have no problem with it. As long as, again, and to that, the initial Reddit post here, just going back to this, what's really interesting from your perspective, when you go with the intention of doing something like Karezza or White Tantra, you find yourself more focused on your partner. So this is why I really don't understand this concept of, disconnect for this particular individual. Again, I don't know the nuances, but because you're not focusing on yourself and getting to the end goal, right, reaching the finish line, you're focusing all of your attention on your partner. And again, me being, I'm not going to name names here, but the first time I tried this, the response from my ex at the time was that it's the closest she's ever felt to me. And, we just, laid there in bliss for about an hour after. And it was just an amazing experience. So you have to slow down, and you have to teach your way a different aspect to this. I hope this answers some unanswered questions in relation to this, because this is always a heavily requested topic for individuals that are interested in these ideas but have partners. I'm not going to say that it's an easy conversation to have, but that chapter, that book, Multi-Orgasmic Man by Mantak Chia, is a very valuable resource that I used and that you should use. And look at it from a perspective. Don't look at it from a selfish perspective. I approached this because I wanted to grow closer to my partners at that time. And I think if you lead with that intention, then the outcomes are always good. Anyway, these aren't theories, these are facts. Speak soon.